I'm excited for today. We have a special guest, as you all know, the Chief of Police here in the city of Richmond. And I love all your beautiful faces. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'd like to start the program. And Madeline, please keep me on task here today. I'm not sure where we're at on the agenda. So thank you. There we go. Introductions, the start of the Zoom meeting, executive board. Okay. Would everyone who is a member of the board like to quickly introduce yourself and say good morning, and then we will go on to our guest speaker of the morning. Janet, would you like to say good morning and introduce yourself?
I would be happy to do that. I heard you say that and I just didn't dawn on it that dawn on me to do it. My name is Janet Abelson and I'm Vice President of Membership. And I'm also the chair of the nominating committee.
Okay, thank you. Madeline?
Hi, I'm Madeline Cronenberg. I'm Vice President Programs, and I'm the Zoom account holder.
And you're a member of the nominating committee.
And I'm a member of the nominating committee, yes.
Okay, so excuse me if I miss someone. I'm gonna start with Linda. Linda, would you say good morning and introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. I'm Linda Whitmore, and I am the Assistant Vice President with Madeline for Programs and Forums.
Thank you so much for that. Next, Anne.
Yes, I'm Ann Munoz and I'm the treasurer.
Thank you. Is Mrs. Braxton on? Yes, Mrs. Braxton?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to help Naomi get on. I'm Myrtle Braxton and I'm the acting secretary of the League of Women Voters and I'm on the Commission on Aging for the city of Richmond.
And I call her Miss Richmond because she's on 100 committees. Thank you. And we have our coach here today. Would you like to introduce yourself? Mrs. White? I see her face. Are you muted? Good morning.
She's muted.
Mrs. White, you'd like to introduce yourself?
Oh, she's still trying to connect.
Oh, okay, I'll move on. I don't want to spend a lot of time with these introductions. Just jump in there. Tyra, you're here. Would you please introduce yourself? Did we lose her?
Yes, I'm in two places. I'm sorry. My name is Tyra Wright, and I am a member at large of the executive board for the League of Women Voters.
Thank you.
I'm Sherry McCoy, and I'm on the.
I'm sorry, Naomi is in the waiting room.
Sorry about that. Sherry, continue.
I was done. I introduced myself. So Sherry McCoy.
And your responsibility is connected with what?
I do voter registration for the League of Women Voters.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Naomi, are you ready to say good morning? Okay. All right.
We have Consuelo.
Consuelo, please speak.
Yes, I'm Consuelo Lara, and I'm a member of the executive board. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Naomi said she was in the waiting room.
Okay.
Okay.
Madeline will let her in. And Mrs. Calloway, is she here this morning?
I went off because because I'm not seeing right. And
you need to mute yourself for a moment.
trying to get back on right now.
Mrs.
I can't
Calloway.
find my glasses.
Ms. Calloway is not here.
Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so
I'm sorry, Madam President, Naomi's on now.
okay, Naomi, we have gone around and introduced ourselves primarily because I wanted our keynote speaker to know who we were. So if you would quickly say good morning and give your name.
Good morning. My name is Naomi Williams. Thank you. And I'm a member of the LWV CCC. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all of the board members this morning that are present. If not, please jump in before we move forward and I introduce our keynote speaker.
Do you want me to introduce the nominating committee or do that later?
Do it later, please.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we want the keynote speaker to speak and then be free, or she can leave and then conduct the business of the day. We don't want to hold her here all day. So with all that said and done, I'm very excited and pleased to have the Chief of Police, French, here today. And one of the things that I wanted to emphasize that I was, we have a bio here for everyone to read and what have you, but I just want to emphasize a point that when she accepted the position to take on this great responsibility, that made her the only female chief of police in the state of California. Now, I don't know if it's still standing, but I mean, that in itself is impressive. So I just wanted to emphasize that. The bio is there and everyone is welcome to read it. But at this point, I'd just like to say good morning and welcome, Chief French, and the floor is yours.
Good morning, and I just have to do one correction, not the only female chief, the only African-American female chief in the state. There are other females here in the state of California that are police chiefs. Just want to make sure I give due recognition to the other women across our state. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. So I know my bio's in there. I'm not going to go over my bio, but just a little bit about me. I've been with the Richmond Police Department for the last 23 years, and I've served as the police chief for the last 2 years. I was appointed as interim in September of 2019, and I was appointed as the permanent police chief in August of 2020. And I have to say that this has probably been the most difficult time in my career. Of course, I have the responsibility of the entire police department and safety across the city of Richmond, but it's also a very difficult time for the policing profession with, reform efforts, the killings that we've seen across the country involving law enforcement and community members, the defund movement. It's just been, and COVID, there's just been so much. So when I took over in September 2019, it was after a vote of no confidence in our previous chief. Morale was low. There was a difficult time in the department already, just because of the tensions internally between management team and the Police Officers Association. And as we, try to work our way through that, moving into early 2020, of course, all of us were disrupted with COVID and trying to navigate, keeping the city safe, keeping officers safe, and dealing with this pandemic that, of course, some of us have never experienced before. I don't think any of us have ever experienced a pandemic of this magnitude in our lifetimes. It was very difficult. Of course, we lost a sergeant to COVID, and that was hard hitting for our department. And then all of a sudden, in the midst of trying to do things differently in terms of keeping people safe, then we had the George Floyd killing, which of course, really, there had been killings between law enforcement and the community prior. I mean, there are incidents, there are some that I don't think that we can prevent. But this one was different. This was one that I think everybody saw as a murder of one of our community members, and even law enforcement finally, some people that, would finally stand up and say, this is not right and this is not what we do. But of course, this brought a lot of community out. We had the protests nationwide. We had small protests in Richmond. Thankfully, there were peaceful protests. But this really was the community coming out and saying, we are not going to tolerate this. We have to do things differently. As a result of this, our city council created a task force to reimagine what public safety should look like in Richmond. And I should say at that time, also, we had some major budget issues that we were dealing with in Richmond, a $27 million deficit that we were facing in the 2020-2021 budget. And with those difficulties, the police department lost about 34 positions, 20 sworn positions and 14 non-sworn positions, and another couple $1 million reduction of our budget to deal with those issues. So those two things kind of merged together, the reductions in our budget and the need and want for a different community policing model to deal with the policies and procedures so that things like George Floyd incident didn't happen in Richmond, as well as how we can still continue community policing efforts with a reduced police force. It's obvious that we couldn't provide the same level of service that we had been providing before because we have 34 less people, which is significant. And that was a reduction just last year, and we had been having reductions in years previous. So this task force was created to reimagine public safety. They began meeting somewhere around October, I believe. And earlier this year, they came out with recommendations on how we can reimagine what public safety looks like in Richmond. Many of the recommendations are great recommendations. They deal with some mental health issues, homelessness issues, youth issues, giving youth jobs, great recommendations, things that will hopefully over time reduce the amount of calls that the police department gets for service, because we're trying to address root causes of crime and put more resources into the community so that they don't go into crisis mode and we're called to respond. And then also letting other people deal with a lot of the mental health issues as opposed to the police department, which I think we're seeing across the nation. That's what the call is, that police officers shouldn't have to respond to a lot of those calls. And so I agree with all of those recommendations, giving money to our Office of Neighborhood Safety in the city, who deals with gun violence and really targets the people that we believe are involved in gun violence. So those recommendations were put forth, but the issue that I had as a police chief was that the funding for all of those services, the task force wanted it to come from the police department, which would have resulted in a $10.3 million reduction to the police department, which I could only do by laying off police officers. And so obviously this became a huge issue within our community, even though the task force is an open public meeting, and they had some community meetings that they invited folks to. I don't think a lot of the community at large that just don't pay attention to local politics knew what was happening. So I began to talk to a lot of the neighborhood council groups, because we always attended neighborhood council meetings to discuss, what these reductions would mean to the services that we would be able to provide to the community. And a lot of people weren't happy with those reductions in services. And so unfortunately, it became an issue that was very divided within our community. We have the task force and members that supported the task force that said, we want the money to come from the police department. We want to do things differently. And then we had, members of the community saying, we live here, we want our police department, we still need police services. And I think it's still a really divided issue. I really regret that it became so divisive in our community, because I think we all want the same thing. We all want safety across the board in our communities. It's just how we get there. I think, like I said, over time, a lot of these programs that were proposed and that we're working on implementing will eventually reduce some calls for service and reduce some crime. But I don't think it's going to be significant enough for me to significantly reduce my workforce. I think where we're at now is not enough for not enough officers to serve our community. We went from having over 200 officers to now having an authorized strength of 145. And I'm down to 139 officers actually working. Well, not actually working. I'm down to 139. And out of that 139, 25 of those people are off on injury leave or light duty. So I'm down to just over 100 officers to serve, not only respond to calls for service, but to also do the investigative work and everything else that we need to get done. So it's a very challenging time for us. But I'm at the point now where this is where we're at. We need to move forward. We need to figure out how to do things with the staff and the resources that we have. But we're in a challenging time. A lot of officers that when we were looking at when layoffs were on the table, there were a list of 23 officers that were going to get laid off if the recommendations were going to go through the way they were proposed, and that was a $10.3 million reduction. And so those officers started applying with many different police departments around the area. And just in the last month, I had 6 officers leave to work at different police departments because they were concerned about job stability. Additionally, I have about another 7 to 8 officers that are in background processes with other police departments and are probably going to leave. So hiring and retention of officers is going to be it is a significant challenge for me right now, and will continue to be for the next year or so. We're looking at how we can redeploy our officers, but we're with the amount of staffing we have, we also have to look at what services we're going to have to reduce because of the reduction in resources. We were hoping not to have to reduce any further services, but unfortunately, we've just come to a time where there's no other options. So let's see. So while it's been a difficult time, I think it's also a time of transition for this profession. And I want to use this time of transition to be a positive thing. I think that there are much needed changes in my profession and how we provide services to communities. And so I'm continuing to implement a lot of my own reform efforts that I had put together even before the conversation around reform started. And so I'm happy to report that over the last year, we started a cultural competency training for our officers. I realized that the history of this uniform, and there's a long-standing history even in Richmond where there weren't good police community relations. We can all think back to the 70s with the cowboys and the big payout that happened, was the largest payout in the country for that time, in which there was a payout because there were a group of officers that were using excessive force within our community. And even though that happened in the 70s, I know it's important for me to teach our young officers that history, because even though it was years ago, it still impacts how we do our job today. The children and grandchildren of the people that were affected back then, know those stories. And some people even can remember, their door getting kicked in or seeing the abuse at firsthand of what our officers caused to the community. So I think teaching that to our officers and letting them know that history can help them better prepare them for the resistance that we encounter in the community. So we started a cultural competency training. It has a lot of different levels. So the new officers that come in they have to work with a community based organization they'll shadow them for a week to see how we can better interact and work with various organizations across our city. They have to do a community project with a community member. And it's all to teach them that we as law enforcement can't do things alone. We really have to partner with the community in this true community policing model to address crime and disorder across the city. And so we're continuing those partnerships. We're continuing to educate our staff, and we're also continuing to put in policies and procedures that are reflective of what the community is calling for. You know, we were one of the first departments to start de-escalation training across the country. Richmond has been a model for a lot of innovative policing methods, and we're continuing to see what we can put in place, what we can try that's new, so that we don't have those interactions that lead to negative results. So in addition to the cultural competency training, we're also partnering with different organizations like the Center for Policing Equity, which is a group that reviews all of our data and provides recommendations and reports for the community to view, so that we can see, you know, our who we're stopping, like our car stops. Are we disproportionate in the people that we're stopping? And so it's an outside entity that can look at our data and provide us with recommendations on how we can be better at policing. So those are just a couple of the things that we're doing reform-wise. Those are a couple of the challenges. I see this as an opportunity for us to improve and get better, even though it's going to be challenging with the reduction in budget, reduction in staffing. You know, the old adage that you have to do more with less, you just can't do more with less. I think that's a terrible saying that, you know, we tried to buy into, and it's just not, we cannot do more with less. We're going to do less with less. So that's where we're at. I want to open it up for any questions.
I see one hand up. Is that Naomi?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay. Naomi, please, if you have a question, ask.
Okay, my question is, I think that you was trying to hire 2 people from the civil service, oh no, the community service part, to replace the officers that you have already lost to fill in. And the city council had said that you could hire, but when you try to hire these 2 people, they took those 2 people and took them away and took that money with them to someplace else. Why did they take the money and put them over in SEIU union? I'm confused. If it was a police action, how did SEIU get in there?
Sure. So in our budget recommendation, last year, also during the time when we were reimagining public safety, I was also tasked with seeing what I can do within the police department to reduce the amount of sworn positions and how I can do some of the same tasks with professional staff as opposed to sworn staff. And so I came up with some community service officer positions that can take police reports and do some other low-level police activities, so it could free up police officers to do more of the dangerous activities that they have to encounter. And during this budget process, there was the recommendation and approval that those community service officer positions were taken from my department and put in the Reimagining. I don't even know actually which department, because there's not a Reimagining public safety, but the money funds for those positions were given to the Reimagine public safety pot. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. The community service officer positions, as I propose them, cannot be outside of the police department, because you have to access police computers. You take police reports. Only people that work within the police department can take police reports. So that's going to be something that has to be discussed and decided upon. And if they want to keep the funding for those positions to do something else, then that's probably what they're going to end up doing.
Thank you.
Gabe, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, Chief Bisa French, and I'm Gabe Quinto, Vice Mayor of El Cerrito, and a former member of this board and part of the nominating committee. I want to say how grateful we are for you to be here and joining us. I heard you speak at the Institute of Local Government, and And you spoke, and you're letting, you know, elected officials up and down the state and fellow police chiefs and city managers, you know what was happening and the shortage of police that you have now. And I very much appreciated that. I do understand now that you only have 2 detectives to, you know, solve crimes. Are you able to get more personnel in that department to help in all the killings that you've had, and the shootings are an all-time high this year?
Yeah, so no, when we continue to reduce police officers, the focus has to be on patrol. Patrol has to be available to respond to calls for service. At a minimum, we have a minimum staffing. So there's 9 officers on duty at any given time across the entire city of Richmond. So as our numbers reduce, as officers leave, and especially if they leave from patrol, I have to pull from investigations and other areas like traffic to fill in those gaps in patrol, because I have to maintain that minimum staffing level. I'm in the process right now. We have 6 teams that cover 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I'm in the process of disbanding one of those teams, and that's the weekend swing shift team, which I wasn't even fully staffing this year. And again, I have to have the officers minimum staffing to go out there and respond when you call 911. So that means all of these other areas suffer. So right now we don't investigate hardly any property crimes. So if somebody breaks in your house, steals your stuff, we don't have the detectives to do the investigative follow-up work to figure out who that was. Unless we have really solid leads, the case isn't going to get investigated. Fraud cases, computer crime cases, I don't have the personnel to address any of those types of crimes. So they go, I mean, we'll take the police report, it's documented, but it's not going to get followed up on, it's not going to get investigated. One of the things that we had to pull back from last year was even responding to calls and taking reports. Historically, I've always been a proponent of a police officer responding to take a report if your car is broken into, whatever might happen, because most people don't call the police. So when the one time you do, you want a police officer to show up to take your police report. I mean, you pay taxes, that's what I would expect. And because of the reduction in our staff, I can't send an officer out. So we refer people to make reports online. Of course, there's some issues with that, especially in our community. Some people don't have access to computers. We have, older people that may not feel comfortable going on computers. So we're just continually trying to figure out how we can provide the best level of service with the reductions that we have. So to answer your question, yeah, there's only, we've had 11 homicides this year. We have 4 homicide detectives to investigate the 11 homicides, plus the 50 plus other shootings that we've had. So obviously the team is overwhelmed. They're doing the best that we can, but the quality of investigations suffer.
Thank you.
I think there's some hands. Miss Grussie has her hand up, Miss Dandy and Miss Langlois.
So we can do them in the order.
Does that mean me, Ms. Collier?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Hi, I'm Joni Grassi, and I do have a short question, but I first wanted to thank Chief Bisa French for, in the past, I was a Crime Watch captain, and she called me and said, I'm coming to your meeting, and we were so excited. And this is about back in 2015, Chief French. And then the day before it was happening, she calls me and she said, and she's apologizing to me. And I'm just was so humbled by this. She said, my son was invited to the White House by Michelle Obama, and I'm going with him. Can I miss the meeting? I said, we are so proud. You are going to the White House to see Michelle Obama. We will just cheer for you. But she was so humble, and she called me apologizing. I've never gotten it over it, Chief French. And just thank you for all you've done in the meantime. And with all your talents, here you were apologizing for missing a Crime Watch neighborhood meeting. in my backyard. So, but my little question, Naomi's laughing because she was on the executive board of Crime Watch. I know she was. I hear that President Biden has appointed, I believe, former Chief Chris Magnus to some position. Is he going to be helpful, I hope, in any way to you or our community still, or can he be?
Well, he's going to be dealing with the Border Patrol. So I'm not sure how much of a
I forgot
help
what the
he is.
position. Oh,
Yeah, but he is still somebody that I consult with and I talk to regularly. So he's still helpful for me personally. So
that's something. Thank you again for all you do for us. Thank you.
thank you. And thank you for forgiving me for not being at the meeting. I hate saying that I'm going to do something and not being there, but I just have to add, because I am going to brag, that same son is now getting ready to start Harvard Law School. So
Fabulous.
very excited about
Congratulations.
that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Dandy, I see your hand up.
Good morning. I'm still doing hair and my hair is still wrapped up. So, and no makeup or lashes, so I'm not coming on. Good morning, Chief Bisa. I have a question. I know it's probably at the bottom of the totem pole, but because I work with the youth so much in the community, it's always a concern to me, especially things that's going on. So my question is, with all the cuts, which is just making me sick to my stomach, just like I said, the bottom of the totem pole, are we going to still do the Community Safety Academy, the Neighborhood Watch, where the officers come to our meetings? I know you came to one of them, and then the Explorer program and PAL. Now, like I said, I know that they're at the bottom of the totem pole, and those are probably not even on your list of concerns, not saying it like that, but concerns about things that can keep the community up to what's going on. But that's a concern for me, because a lot of kids need to go and be in these programs and want to be in these programs, even with whatever Reimagining is saying that they don't want them. I know for a fact, because I'm boots on the ground with these kids that want these programs. So what are we going to do about them? Are you going to keep them, or you're at a standstill?
So my plan is to keep as many of the community programs as possible. That's their community policing model that I think really contributed to the reduction in crime. We have to continue to engage the community in non-enforcement ways, because that's how we build trust. That's how we build relationships. That's how we work together to address the crime issues. The Community Safety Academy is an 8-week academy that we bring people into our department and teach them all about what we do. We put them through scenario training. We allow them to do ride-alongs, teach them everything about the police department so they have a better understanding. And I think it's really been a great program, because people are like, oh, I never knew you did that. And look how much training goes into this or that. It's really eye-opening for people, especially when we do that scenario training where we put you in real life situations. Of course, they're not real.
Yeah, I got killed.
And you have to make those quick split-second decisions on what you're going to do. It's the scenarios that police officers are put in on a daily basis. And until you're actually put in that situation and you're having to make that choice, I think a lot of people come out of that with a very different perspective on, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback what police officers do. And of course, they make a lot of mistakes. I mean, we're all human. Mm-hmm. But when you go through that scenario and you see how you react, even though you think you would react in a different way, when that stress level is high and you're trying to react, it's really eye-opening. So I think programs like that are really important. I think it's important that we connect with our community in that way. And so we want to continue programs like that. The challenge is, again, I'm going to state the reduction in staff makes this all challenging. When I have to focus on just responding to calls for service, everything else becomes an overtime issue. And overtime has been a big issue for a long time. But I don't have extra officers that are sitting around waiting to just do programs like this. They are responding to calls. And yes, they want the community to know what we're doing. So they're willing to come in on overtime to put on some of these programs, and then I get beat up about the amount of overtime that I'm using. But this all doesn't happen in a vacuum. police officer out there doing their job. And then this is kind of some of the extra stuff that we're doing. And the only way to do it is on overtime. So we're trying to figure out the Explorer program, because the Explorer rate, you have to have a certain amount of officers per group of explorers when they come out to different festivals and activities. And if I keep getting beat up on overtime, then those are the programs that unfortunately suffer. I can't have a bunch of explorers if I don't have police officers to watch them. That's just the way the program goes. I don't have full-time officers just to watch explorers, because it's not a full-time job. So that continues to be a challenge.
Thank you. I mean, all of this breaks my heart, especially mainly because my daughter's basically in all these programs and have gone through these programs. And as she's aging out, and those that are trying to come under her, it's hard to give people information when I don't know, or she doesn't even know if these programs are still going to exist, which we've been through these programs. And I do understand overtime, because these officers, sometimes they get off their shift and then they go into the Community Safety Academy to help community members understand what's going on. So for me, this is a big step back for a lot of reasons why people don't understand what's going on in the community. So that was my main question, to make sure that I get an understanding of the what's next for youth and community members for programs like this. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that question.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Get over here. Marilyn, your hand is up.
Yes. Hello. Thank you very much. My camera is off. I am just recovering from hip surgery, and so a little disheveled, but very happy to be here. I'm a Richmond resident. My name is Marilyn Langlois, Richmond resident. I've been a longtime League member. In fact, I was a former president of the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley, where I used to live 20 years ago. And I really appreciate the West County League inviting you, Chief French, to speak to us today, because I always appreciate your presentations and your commitment and your perseverance in dealing with a lot of these challenges that you face and the shortages in staff. Here's my question with regard to the Reimagine situation. What kind of a timeline do you envision as the programs develop and we get develop these mental health response teams and some of these other types of positions that could go back into the police department that are not sworn officers to do just sort of report taking? And as that gets built up, how do you envision transition in police dispatch so that the dispatch can ascertain which calls actually require a sworn officer to go out and which calls don't necessarily need a sworn officer because there's nothing life-threatening going on, but they could be addressed by one of these mental health teams or something like that. So in that way, to somewhat lessen the demand of time on your sworn officers.
Right, that's a great question. So I think that we have a really capable dispatch staff that will be able to discern whether a call should go to the police department as opposed to the mental health workers. However, I don't believe that that's the model that the Reimagining Task Force has come up with. They are looking to have a completely separate dispatch system for people to call. I am actually very concerned with that. I think most calls are still going to come into our 911 system. They're still going to be directed, and then there's going to be a delay because then those calls are going to have to be transferred to another dispatch system to be able to be dispatched to the mental health team. So I think that if with training and additional staff in our dispatch system center, I think that our dispatchers would be able to navigate that. But again, that's not what the actual Reimagining Task Force is recommending. They want a completely separate dispatch system. In addition to that too, there's state legislation right now that's calling for a mental health dispatch, overall statewide mental health dispatch system where you call a certain number for mental health services and then they dispatch to mental health services. So if we in Richmond have a statewide system with one number, another mental health number just for Richmond, and then the actual 911 system, I think it's going to be very confusing and challenging for our folks to know, especially in a crisis situation, on who they're supposed to call. So I hope that that's something that eventually gets worked out. And the statewide system, I think, will be good because it will be across the state. It's one number, and I'm sure the state will do some, really effective campaigns so that people know exactly what number to call for mental health services. And then everything else goes to the 911 system or our dispatch system, where if we have to transfer, we can. But I don't think that there should be a separate dispatch for mental health services just in Richmond. I think it's going to be very confusing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I concur on that, having too much duplicative, because reality is people are going to call 911 anyway, That's what
Absolutely.
they're used to doing. So that if we could get to the point where the dispatch is trained to know which calls to direct where, I think that would be more useful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Braxton, I believe your hand was up next.
Unmute yourself, Myrtle. Oh, okay.
I actually have two questions. Number one, I'm concerned because of the fact that the last budget reduction, we had to terminate the text program. And that was a program that really helped starting in elementary school to teach children, right from wrong, where crimes were concerned, not to be afraid of the police and all this kind of thing. And I say that because I think in the city of Richmond, I don't think people realize that because of community policing, we know our beat officers. We know, like I've known Bisa for how many years, we know our chief of police. As Naomi will attest to, when one of our chiefs retired, he used to come back every Christmas and bring me and Naomi a Christmas present. So I'm just saying, you know them, and now they don't want that kind of thing. So I agree with Marilyn too. My question really is, what are we going to do while they're training these people to replace the police? In other words, like I said one time, who do I call? Gangbusters? But I mean, what am I supposed to do if there is a mental crisis and these group of people have not been trained, but we've already pulled the money out of the police department to do this? And this, a lot of other things is very, it's very scary. That's the only word I can think of. What do we do while they're being trained?
So this is the frustration of my staff, is that we're being reduced, yet we're still the ones tasked with responding to these calls with less people. And when you actually look at the data, we actually do a pretty good job in responding to these calls. Nothing's ever going to work out perfectly. And yeah, when we do use force, a lot of times it does involve a mental health situation or crisis. But in just kind of doing an overall view of those calls would still have been a police officer response, as opposed to the mental health teams that are being set up, meaning there was a weapon involved, there was some type of violence involved. So those are the calls that won't go to the mental health workers. They're still going to continue to go to the police department. And so that's the challenge. We are going to answer your question, we are still going to have to respond to those calls, and all of them, until these teams are set up.
Thank you. Is it Cordell? Is your hand up?
Good morning. Yes. Good morning, Ms. Cheryl, Legal Women Voters. My name is Cordell Handler, and I'm a Park Plaza Neighborhood Council person. And so thank you so much for having me here today. So to Chief, hello, Chief French. So my question is, do you envision having a consultant to do a complete reorganization chart for the department? That's it.
Yeah, we're going to do a complete reorganization chart of the department, but I won't have a consultant to do that. I have to have one of my folks do that. It's not in the budget to outsource. But yes, Cordell, we'll be getting you a up-to-date chart. We were just waiting for the budget to get passed. And so now that it's passed, we'll be doing the updated chart.
So I will pass my question to Linda.
Okay, yes, her hand is up. She is next. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chief French, thank you very much for coming this morning and speaking to us. I don't know if a lot of you know, I'm Linda Whitmore, and I am on that Reimagining the Police Safety Task Force. I was one of the minorities that didn't vote for defunding or removing money from our police department and removing officers. I believe that we should have been phasing this in, like Myrtle was saying. I think there's some great programs. We need a mental health crisis center in our city. We need programs for our youth in our center, jobs for them. We need to work on and deal with our homeless in our city. But I didn't think it should have been on the backs of our police department. And I remember when I got involved with the safety task force, I got involved for reimagining our community policing system, not for the budgeting of our police or reducing our police, but just reimagining how we can use community police to work with our city in a better way. We talk about Chief Magnus. We were a blue ribbon city for our community policing department under Chief Magnus. Chief French, when she became our chief, she got the job and we were still a blue ribbon community policing department. And all of a sudden, people forgot about that. Community policing was part of our, was ingrained in our community. It was so beautiful to have that. And the reason I'm saying this is that, and the chief can't say this, is that you need to, and maybe I'm going off script, but if you have concerns, then you go to your city council and voice your concerns. If you have concerns, you go to the safety task force meetings. We have them, and voice your concerns, okay? We can't just sit here and say, these are our problems. Oh, well, what can we do? We can do a lot, okay? I might get kicked off the task force for saying this, but I don't care. But we can do a lot. You know, we can voice our opinions, okay? We want, you know, programs are fantastic. We need them, but we need our police also. And I think that if we're really shorthanded and we're not getting our burglaries investigated, and we're not having police come to our neighborhood meetings anymore, and we're not having police investigate traffic crimes, stopping cars because they don't have police there to stop the cars who are speeding through our streets anymore, then we speak up. We pay the taxes, we live here. It's our city, it's what we need to do. So Chief can't say this. I'm speaking behind her back. She doesn't even hear me saying this, but we need to speak up for our city and for our rights. Okay, so I just want to thank you, Police Chief Bisa French, for working with the Safety Task Force and working with the city and not giving up and saying you're going to reimagine the way you can reimagine, even with all the difficult things that are happening to our police department. But I think as citizens of this, residents of this city, we need, even El Cerrito needs to speak up too. Because I know that we have a hand in El Cerrito and we do things with San Pablo, it's not just Richmond. So I'm gonna get off of my platform right now. But I think that we can do a lot as residents of the city. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, Naomi, your hand.
You know, all of these ideas that we have, and you say go out and speak out, who we're gonna speak to? We got a city council with the majority of RPAs. This is itself hurting our city too, because they get their mind made up in the beginning. They have their meetings, and I'm sure they talk about political stuff in their meetings. They're not just there to talk about how do you wash clothes without water. They're actually involved. So what can we do to turn that around? I mean, you know, if you in one group, you make up your mind, that's what you're gonna do. No matter what I say, you're not gonna change it, not for me. So what do you think all of us been talking about all this time? Not to defund the police, even before we defunded the police, they said it's not defunded, but yes, they did, because when they took those 2 jobs away and gonna put it on the SCIU, that was defunded. and they defunded it last year for some reason. But who we gonna talk to? We can talk to two that seem to think about doing the right thing. But we got the full majority sitting up there on city council that have made up their mind.
Madam President, I'm going to be quiet, but Naomi, even your voice being heard and in the records is more important than not saying anything.
Yeah,
So
well, I'm not saying don't say anything.
Move on. I know that, but I'm just saying.
No, but I'm not saying don't say nothing. You all should always speak out. Yeah. Enough of us should speak out. Yeah. But the minority is always talking, like me.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in there. And what you have just said, Miss Naomi, is you've just taken me out of retirement as a community activist. And I am going to become very active. And you come from all sides. You deal with the people at hand. You deal with the people who manage the money. There's many ways that you can attack a situation if you're not satisfied with it. And I'm going to count on you to be with me when I step forward to do that, because we're going to turn this around, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Are there any more questions? Well, Chief French. Oh, no. My hand just went up. I'm sorry. I was going to say thank you for coming. Okay. Janet, your hand is up.
No, that was Gabe Quintos too.
Okay.
He had his hand up also.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam President. A quick question. I know we did pass countywide the Measure X sales tax, and that was supposed to pay for mental health, addiction services, homelessness services, and know that of the 19 cities, including Richmond, we do not have a health department like what we see in Berkeley. So why is the city of Richmond, why are they taking additional funds when all that extra funding on the Measure X tax are going to these services and are going to nonprofits already? Is this in addition to the services getting in the county, from the county?
That was my question. Like I said before, a lot of great services, proposals from the Reimagining Task Force, but we can fund these in different ways. Measure X is one of them. So I don't have the answer to that question, and I will continue to ask, why aren't we using the funding that's being provided? We should be leveraging funds. The county the county is responsible for mental health services. And if they're not providing the level of mental health services that we as a city want, we need to be trying to leverage additional funds and holding them accountable for providing, excellent services. And rather than just scrapping it and saying, okay, we're just going to do our own. We're still paying. You all know I live here in Richmond too, so I pay taxes here. We're still paying taxes to the county to do these services, and yet we're going to be paying money now to the city to do the same services. So,
thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, Janet, I see your hand up. You have a question?
Unmute, Janice.
Janet, you have to unmute. Oh, she's having difficulty.
If the host can unmute her, if you click on whoever the host is can help unmute her.
Okay, Madeline.
In the meantime, I think Ms. Wright has a question.
There, did I get it now?
Yes, you did.
Good. Okay, thank you. I was curious about your opinion about the relationship between Richmond and El Cerrito. I'm on the El Cerrito City Council. I have lived in Richmond, and in the past, obviously I can't now because I'm on the City Council in El Cerrito. But anyway, I was wondering about your opinion about the relationship between El Cerrito and Richmond in terms of the policing of the two cities and how they interact, if you think it goes well or doesn't go well.
What
do you think?
We actually have a really good relationship. We put, as you all know, because you passed the budget, we provide dispatch services for the city of El Cerrito. So that means that we're all on the same radio channel communications. And so that really helps. We know what's going on in El Cerrito because we hear the calls and they know what's going on, so we can assist each other better. And so I think it's really been a great partnership. It's really been a good, it really works for us. So years ago, we used to, our dispatch center used to dispatch for not only El Cerrito, but Kensington, San Pablo, El Cerrito Fire, Richmond Fire, all of them. We used to do in-house at our dispatch center. And then we got away from that model, but we still continued the relationship with El Cerrito. So it's just Richmond and El Cerrito. And I just think that I wish that we were still dispatching for San Pablo. I wish we still heard those calls because everything is so interconnected. San Pablo, we completely surround San Pablo. So it's, to me, it's important for us to know what's going on there and for them to know what's going on in Richmond because we're always constantly having to work together. But the relationship is good.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for coming today. It's been really interesting hearing what you have to say. And I wish you the best.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Mrs. White, did you have a question? I can't see everyone. Mrs. White?
Right, Miss Wright.
Oh, right. Okay.
Good morning. And first, I just want to thank you, Chief French, for coming out. I always enjoy hearing you and appreciate everything that you and your department have done for the city of Richmond. And also, just personally, I appreciate you being a woman officer. It's great. I do have some concerns, but I'm not going to form them into a question at this moment because I provide services in terms of doing business with the city in terms of housing, real estate. And we have people who sell, people who buy, and I'm sure there are going to be questions from clients as to how they can feel safe. There's only so much that as a realtor that we can actually say because we don't want to sway a person one way or another from a neighborhood or area. But those are some of my concerns. And at some point, hopefully, maybe I can have a chance to dialogue with you personally to express those questions that I'm hearing on the ground with regard to clients. So again, I just wanted to thank you and appreciate you. Thank you for coming to be our guest today.
Thank you. And feel free to contact me. My email is actually under my name. So send me an email, contact me.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Or I see some hands up, but they've already asked a question. I'm wondering if they just simply did not take their hand down.
No, I have a question really quick. This is Miss Dandy.
Oh, my hand.
Okay, go ahead, Miss Dandy.
Chief French, I just have a question or something that maybe you can answer or state for everyone about the METS officer, which is mental health evaluation team. And as far as I know, because I do work with the mental health, and I know it was a question about mental health. Most of the workers, they come from, especially late in the night, from Martinez. With all that going on and the changes of numbers, the 911, the 988, and we only have one METS officer because of budget and everything. How is that going to work and work together? Have you guys thought about working with mental health workers to ride with you, being that the budgets are being cut, that we don't have enough officers to be out there to go on those calls, to understand those calls, and the fact that it takes an extreme amount of time to get from Martinez to Richmond to work with the people that are out here? How is that, or where's that in any part of the budget that the Reimagining has even talked about? Because they don't understand that mental health does not work between 9 to 5. It actually starts 5:01 to 7:59 in the morning. So how are we going to work with that?
So I'm not sure exactly how the Reimagining team is setting up the mental health response team for Richmond. But I can tell you that I am continuing on with our mental health team relationship with the county. And what that is we have an officer that strictly focuses on mental health response with a clinician from the county. So we've had this program for 5+ years in Richmond. It's only one officer and one clinician. And what they do mainly is follow up on a lot of mental health calls. So we try to keep people from going back into crisis. Now, I would love to have more teams of officers like that, but I would also love to see mental health workers riding with police officers and responding to calls in the moment. So like I said earlier, we actually have a lot of success for the mental health calls, that despite what the narrative is, we actually have a lot of success in responding to calls, a lot of great outcomes when we respond to mental health calls. I also understand that a police officer is not necessarily needed to respond to all those calls. Sometimes we get a call from a person that says, I've been off my medication, I need to go to the hospital. Easy, officer goes, calls for an ambulance, the ambulance comes and takes the person away. A police officer doesn't necessarily need to respond to that type of call. But the calls where we do need a police officer to respond to, if we have a mental health worker that can be kind of the person that goes in first, and the police officer just more there for safety reasons, I think we can have better outcomes. And I've recently applied for a grant for a program like that.
Thank you.
And these were, again, things that I was looking at internally from my perspective on how we can improve services, how we can incorporate what the community was asking for into our operations. And so I came up with that before the Reimagining Task Force's recommendations came out. But as I was talking about that, I was accused of trying to intervene in what the task force was doing. So I've still applied for a grant that would allow for the combination of a mental health worker and a police officer riding together. Because again, I think that would have good outcomes for our community. And there are still calls that we will have to respond to that are mental health calls that the mental health workers will not respond to because of the level of violence or a weapon involved or something like that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Ms. Cheryl, I have a quick question too.
Okay, and we're gonna, our Q&A is gonna come to an end shortly, but go ahead.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. So, Chief French, do you know how many positions will you be, will be going forward to the personnel board at some point?
I am taking a community, I was going to take the 2 community service officer positions to the personnel board, but those were taken away from me. But I'm taking a civilian manager position to the personnel board. So I'm reallocating a captain position into a civilian manager position, because there are things in our administrative bureau that I feel have been falling through the cracks because the movement and rotation of sworn police officers happens so often that especially in our admin bureau, which deals with training and risk management issues, contracts, it takes a little while to learn some of those things. They're not necessarily police officer tasks that a police officer has to do. And once they, it takes about a year to really get up on all of the ins and outs of those types of duties. And once they learn it, then we're transferring them to another area to work. And so we're losing all that knowledge. And I just think a professional manager that can manage all of those things, that can be consistent, provide some consistency in that position would help. So that's the one position now that I'm going to be taking a personnel board.
Thank you for that answer. I have a question, and it's a short one. And do I have the right understanding that along with the cuts, there's also a freeze in hiring as well? You can't, when those officers leave for other employment, you cannot fill those positions. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. So this last budget that was passed at the end of June froze an addition, well, not froze, they took away an additional 12 police officer positions. So that brought my authorized number down to 145. So anything when I go below that. So right now I'm at 139, so I can hire up to that 145 number.
Okay, thank you for that answer.
Mhm.
We don't want to take up any more of your time. We're so appreciative of you coming today. You have a cheerleading section in this group right here. We appreciate you so much. And if we can be supportive in any type of way, we're going to email you and see what it is as a community we can do to help our community and you be successful.